Hello, everyone. I'm going to continue reading from the Master Plan of Evangelism. I'm going to be reading chapter 1, part 1. It's a little bit long to do all at one section, so we're just going to do the first half of chapter 1. Ready? Chapter 1, Selection. He chose from them 12. Luke 6:13. Men were his method. It all started by Jesus calling a few men to follow him. This revealed immediately the direction his evangelistic strategy would take. His concern was not with programs to reach the multitudes, but with men whom the multitudes would follow. Remarkable as it may seem, Jesus started to gather these men before he ever organized an evangelistic campaign or even preached a sermon in public. Men were to be his method of winning the world to God. The initial objective of Jesus' plan was to enlist men who could bear witness to his life and carry on his work after he returned to the Father. John and Andrew were the first to be invited as Jesus left the scene of the great revival of the Baptists at Bethany beyond the Jordan. Andrew, in turn, brought his brother Peter. The next day, Jesus found Philip on his way to Galilee, and Philip found Nathanael. There is no evidence of haste in the selection of these disciples, just determination. James, the brother of John, is not mentioned as one of the group until the 4 fishermen are recalled several months later by the Sea of Galilee. Shortly after, Matthew is called to follow the Master, as Jesus passed through Capernaum. The particulars surrounding the call of the other disciples are not recorded in the Gospels, but it is believed that they all occurred in the first year of the Lord's ministry. As one might expect, these early efforts of soul winning had little or no immediate effect upon the religious life of his day, but that did not matter greatly. For as it turned out, these few early converts of the Lord were destined to become the leaders of his church that was to go with the gospel to the whole world, and from the standpoint of his ultimate purpose, the significance of their lives would be felt throughout eternity. That's the only thing that counts. Men willing to learn. What is more revealing about these men is that at first they do not impress as being key men. None of them occupied prominent places in the synagogue, nor did any of them belong to the Levitical priesthood. For the most part, they were common laboring men, probably having no professional training beyond the rudiments of knowledge necessary for their vocation. Perhaps a few of them came from families of some considerable means, such as the sons of Zebedee. But none of them could have been considered wealthy. They had no academic degrees in the arts and philosophies of their days. Like their master, their formal education likely consisted only of the synagogue schools. Most of them were raised in the poor section of the country around Galilee. Apparently, the only one of the 12 who came from the more refined region of Judea was Judas Iscariot. By any standard of sophisticated culture then and now, they would surely be considered as a rather ragged collection of souls. One might wonder how Jesus could ever use them. They were impulsive, temperamental, easily offended, and had all the prejudices of their environment. In short, these men selected by the Lord to be his assistants represented an average cross-section of society in their day. Not the kind of group one would expect to win the world for Christ. Yet Jesus saw in these simple men the potential of leadership for the kingdom. They were indeed unlearned and ignorant according to the world's standard, but they were teachable. Though often mistaken in their judgment and slow to comprehend spiritual things, they were honest men, willing to confess their need. Their mannerisms may have been awkward and their abilities limited, but with the exception of the traitor, their hearts were big. What is perhaps most significant about them was their sincere yearning for God and the realities of his life. The superficiality of the religious life about them had not obsessed their hope for the Messiah. They were fed up with the hypocrisy of the ruling aristocracy. Some of them had already joined the revival movement of John the Baptist. These men were looking for someone to lead them in the way of salvation. Such men, pliable in the hands of the Master, could be molded into a new image. Jesus can use anyone who wants to be used. In noting this fact, however, one does not want to miss the practical truth of how Jesus did it. Here is the wisdom of his method, and in observing it, we return again to the fundamental principle of concentration on those he intended to use. One cannot transform a world except as individuals in the world are transformed. And individuals cannot be changed except as they are molded in the hands of the Master. The necessity is apparent, not only to select a few helpers, but also to keep the group small enough to be able to work effectively with them. Hence, as the company of followers around Jesus increased, it became necessary by the middle of his second year of ministry to narrow the select company to a more manageable number. Accordingly, Jesus called his disciples, and he chose from them 12, whom he also named apostles. See Luke 6 and Mark 3. Regardless of the symbolical meaning one prefers to put on the number 12, it is clear that Jesus intended these men to have unique privileges and responsibilities in the kingdom of God. This does not mean that Jesus' decision to have 12 apostles excluded others from following him, for as we know, many more were numbered among his associates, and some of these became very effective workers in the church. The 70, Mark, James, his own brother, are notable examples of this. Nevertheless, we must acknowledge that there was a rapidly diminishing priority given to those outside the 12. The same rule could be applied in reverse. For within the select apostolic group, Peter, James, and John seem to enjoy a more special relationship to the Master than did the other 9. Only these privileged few are invited into the sick room of Jairus' daughter. They alone go up with the Master and behold his glory on the Mount of Transfiguration. And amid the olive trees of Gethsemane, casting their ominous shadows in the light of the full Passover moon, these members of the inner circle waited nearest to their Lord while he prayed. So noticeable is the preference given to these 3 that had it not been for the incarnation of selflessness in the person of Christ, it could well have precipitated feelings of resentment on the part of the other disciples. The fact that there is no record of the disciples complaining about the preeminence of the 3, though they did murmur about other things, is proof that where preference is shown in the right spirit and for the right reason, offense need not arise. All of this certainly impresses one with the deliberate way that Jesus proportioned his life to those he wanted to train. It also graphically illustrates a fundamental principle of teaching, that other things being equal, the more concentrated the size of the group being taught, the greater the opportunity for effective instruction. Jesus devoted most of his remaining life on earth to these few disciples. He literally staked his whole ministry on them. The world could be indifferent toward him and still not defeat his strategy. It even caused him no great concern when his followers on the fringes of things gave up their allegiance when confronted with the true meaning of the kingdom in John 6:66. But he could not bear to have his close disciples miss his purpose. They had to understand the truth and be sanctified by it, else all would be lost. John 17:17. Thus he prayed not for the world, but for the few God had given him out of the world. Everything depended on their faithfulness. If the world would believe in him through their word. John 17:20. It would be wrong, however, to assume on the basis of what here has been emphasized that Jesus neglected the masses. Such was not the case. Jesus did all that any man could be asked to do and more to reach the multitudes. The first thing he did when he started his ministry was to identify himself boldly with the great mass revival movement of his day by baptism at the hands of John. And he later went out of his way to praise this work of the great prophet. He continuously preached to the crowds that followed his miracle working ministry. He taught them. He fed them when they were hungry. He healed their sick and cast out demons among them. He blessed their children. Sometimes the whole day would be spent ministering to their needs, even to the extent that he had no leisure so much as to eat, as in Mark 6:31. In every way possible, Jesus manifested to the masses of humanity a genuine concern. These were the people whom he came to save. He loved them. He wept over them, and finally died to save them from their sin. No one could think that Jesus shirked mass evangelism. That's part 1 of chapter 1. We'll give you that for right now. God bless you. Have a great day.